I knew something was wrong from the moment the room suddenly went quiet. The sound of the piano just stopped. Her small hands were still shaking on the keys. Lena has just finished the piece she's been practicing for weeks, a piece she wrote herself, feels herself, loves it as if it were a part of her body. But instead of applause, there was silence. Not a single polite nod, not a word of encouragement. Just empty. I heard a whisper from the back row, that child, the child of a single mother. My heart felt like someone was choking me. I didn't turn back. Cannot. I just tightened my grip on the edge of the chair, trying not to let myself crumble on the spot. My name is Danielle Morris. I am 33 years old, single mother of a 9-year-old girl named Lena. A child has a soul like the wind light, but strong, gentle, but deep. That evening she stood on the stage of Jefferson Elementary School amidst yellow lights and hundreds of eyes to perform a piece of music she composed herself. Not pop music, not TikTok background music. They are simple, slow melodies, whispering memories that only I understand. I practiced every night after school. I remember one time my son sat on the living room floor, bowed his head on the old piano that I bought from the flea market for $60 and said, "Mom, this song sounds like Afternoon Rain. I've never heard anyone play like that. Not because she's perfect, but because every note is like a part of her emotions, genuine, unobtrusive. And that's why." The silence after the performance made me feel like I was pushed out of the world. She stood there, bowed, like I taught her, then looked up, searching the audience's eyes for something. One response, a ray of warmth, but I only see fleeting glances. The phone's flashing lights are not directed at the child. The adults are busy checking messages. A few children giggled, and I saw her eyes drooped. I tried to hold back. I knew it, trying to swallow the rising feeling of disappointment. But I, from the middle of the audience, could see his whole world was falling apart. I want to stand up. I want to run up and hug my child, pull him away from that place like running from a burning building. But I couldn't do anything. It's not because I'm weak, but because I'm so used to this. I live in Springfield, Missouri, a town where people always smile when they see you at the supermarket, then whisper judgments behind your back a few hours later. Here, people pay attention to what car you drive, whether your child wears old or new clothes, and whether you wear a wedding ring or not. I work 2 jobs during the day. I work as a janitor at a middle school and at night as a waitress at a 24/7 restaurant next to the freeway. Life isn't glamorous, but I've never been ashamed of it. Because I do everything for Lena, and Lena, she's not like other kids. Doesn't like following fashion, doesn't care about the hot group of friends in school. I like sad music, classical music, instrumental music. Writing music is like writing a diary. It's just I was born in the wrong place to be heard. I never thought that small things like a paper lunchbox or last season's old shoes could create such a big gap. But at Lena's school, those things are almost badges of distinction. She never complained, never asked why she didn't have a Princess Elsa lunchbox like her friends, or why she couldn't take dancing or drawing lessons like other children. Lena just kept silent. It was as if I knew that every question had a silent answer in the eyes of adults. I don't ask for anything. Just please, listen. Nights after a tiring shift at the restaurant, I would come home and sit with my feet up on the chipped coffee table, a bowl of noodles in my hand and my child sitting on the floor hunched over the old guitar. I don't play music to practice like in the book. It's the hesitant notes, as if searching for something deep inside yourself. "Mom, this song is as sad as when I stood outside my neighbor's birthday party and wasn't invited. I stopped. That's not a complaint. That's a piece of memory I just put into the melody." I looked at my child and could only swallow a choking feeling. We don't have much, but I always try to make sure my child doesn't lack the most essential things: kindness, self-respect and a place to sit next to his mother every night to be listened to. When the school announced the annual talent contest, I thought my child would choose to sit quietly in the audience like previous years. Lena is not the type to like the spotlight, but this year is different. She calmly walked into the kitchen, picked up the application form and placed it in front of me. I want them to listen to my song. Not I want to perform. Not I want to win. It's just want to be heard. I hesitated. I know the world out there is not always gentle with rustic children, but I also knew, from the look in her eyes, that if I hadn't nodded at that moment, I would have been the first person to take away Lena's chance to believe in herself. I nodded. Then, let's make the night beautiful, baby. From that day on, every night became an informal music practice session. I cook in the kitchen and my child plays the piano in the living room. There are times when I let the pot boil over, just because I'm caught up in a piece of music my child just composed. Even if I didn't fully understand it, I could feel it. Lena wasn't just playing. I'm telling a story with a melody. However, I also see clearly my child still carries silent worries. At school, Lena is the only child without a new backpack at the beginning of the year. I wore my mother's coat and patched it 3 times. My shoes are clean, but the lining is worn out. And I know, when you stepped on stage that day, the light not only shone on your music, but also shone directly on the things that others easily judge. We chose our performance dresses early. The white dress with purple flowers I wore last Easter season. I sat all evening sewing back the torn hem of my dress. I stood in front of the mirror smiling softly. Mum's patchwork is better than the girls at the store. I want to hug my child tightly, but I just replied, because Mum sews by hand, but loves with all her heart. The night before the exam, Lena asked me to braid her hair. Beautiful, Kingin, but you don't have to look like a princess. I get it. You don't need to hide the truth, just walk up there as yourself, well-groomed, kind and brave enough. That night I lay awake. I'm scared. It's not because you'll forget your lesson, but because I know you are bringing your heart to the stage, and if they turn their backs on that heart, then you will learn the lesson. I don't want you to remember that there are places where no matter how sincere you are, silence can still swallow you up. That night it didn't rain, but cold. The cold makes people cower even when wearing a coat. Lena and I arrived early. Jefferson Elementary School is more crowded than ever. Expensive SUVs are parked all over the lot. Children ran freely through the hallways in metallic dresses, neatly ironed shirts, and sleekly combed hair. Lena squeezed my hand as she walked backstage. I bent down, adjusted my child's shoelaces one last time and watched her take a deep breath. "I'm not like them," I whispered, "but I'll still play." I nodded. "Don't dare say anything more. If you don't believe me, I won't cry if I say it." I sat in the middle of the auditorium, the 4th row slightly to the left, just enough to see my child clearly, but not too close to make him worry. People around were talking loudly. Stories about dance classes, voice teachers, art, summer camps. Each word fell into my ears like a gentle knock on reality. Lena and I came from another world. I clenched my hands. "Tell yourself no problem. It's enough for her to play like at home. Then it's your turn." Next, Lena Morris with an original composition on piano. No one clapped. A few people looked up reflexively. The rest are still bowing their heads to check their phones or rummaging through their bags looking for candy. I walked out. White dress with purple flowers. Carefully polished black shoes. Simple braided hair, no frills. Holding the music book tightly in hand, I walked straight to the piano in the middle of the stage. The light shining on my face seemed to coat my face with a layer of courage. I thought to myself, the baby will be fine, but my heart feels like it's being squeezed. I sat down, adjusted the microphone, just like I had practiced dozens of times at home, and then started playing. At first there were a few gentle, slow notes. Not the type of sound that makes people cheer from the first second. It's the type of music that's like a whisper, inviting the listener into a deeper place, a corner of memory and unnamed emotion. I held my breath. Each of her fingers seemed to be telling a story, and, in those first few seconds, if anyone listens, they will definitely understand. But then I see the two children sitting in the front seat were giggling. A judge bent down to look at his phone. The woman next to me pulled out a bag of gum and chewed her face, absent-minded. Then that voice from behind. That poor girl of a single mother. I heard every word clearly, like nails being driven into my spine. I turned my head very slightly, not revealing that I was looking for the person who had just spoken. But actually, I don't need to see them. I know that type of person well. People live in big houses, new cars, and think being poor means worthless. I want to stand up, want to scream, want to tell them that Lena is my whole world, that she is the only person I know who can turn sadness into music, can whisper things to the piano that no one taught her. But I can't do it, because I'm afraid. Don't be afraid of them. But I'm worried my children will see me lose control, fearful of hurting her more. Lena still plays. My hand doesn't miss a single key. She poured everything she had into that music, as if just one person understood, one person listened. That was enough. But when the last note rang out, then faded into the air, there was still silence. Not a single round of applause, not a single compliment. A cough rang out from the left corner. A chair creaked. The judge in the middle turns to the next page in the file. Lena bowed. Like I teach, keep your head low enough, hold for a second, and then lift. But I saw, clearly, the small smile at the corner of her lips disappear. I quietly walked down, shoulders retracted, hands holding the music book tightly like the last thin shield. I sat there, immobility. My heart felt like it was cracking in my chest. I just want to run to my child, hug him and whisper, "They don't see it, but I see it. I always see it." But I couldn't make it, because at that moment, a man stood up from the last row. At first I only saw his shadow passing through the crowd, a tall figure, light grey vest, neatly cut, silver hair, slow but steady. Steps. No one knows who he is. A few parents turned to each other and whispered, "Who is that guy?" One judge squinted down the list as if checking to see if any performance was wrong. None of us, including me, understood what was going on, but I know one thing. No one walks like that if they don't have a reason to. He strolled, hands clasped behind his back. Don't bow your head, don't panic, just very quiet. The kind of silence that suddenly made the entire auditorium not dare to breathe loudly. When he approached the stage, the female judge on the left, who had been flipping papers furiously, stood up and tried to stop him, but she only moved half her body up, then sat down again, as if something in his eyes stopped him. I looked towards Lena. The girl was standing on the side of the stage, half of her body in darkness, clutching the sheet of music to her chest, as if she were holding on to herself. My eyes looked at him. Don't be afraid, but bewildered. Then he turned towards the judge's table. Sorry, he said, his voice low and clear, each word seeming to tap the air. Can I borrow the microphone for a moment? No one responded. The whole auditorium almost froze. One judge, a young man wearing a wine-coloured blazer, slowly nodded. A student volunteered to stand nearby and give him the microphone. No one asked why. He walked up to the centre of the stage. Hold the microphone as if you've done this 1,000 times before, without ever feeling the need to explain. My name is Dr. Elias Monroe, he began. I actually wasn't planning on being here tonight. I was flying back from New York, but the flight was delayed. So I stopped by to see my niece perform. The whole auditorium murmured. I saw a mother next to me whispering, "Doctor, you said New York. Juilliard." He paused for a moment. His eyes scanned the crowd and landed on something. I think it was Lena. "I spent my whole life teaching piano at Juilliard," he continued. "I have coached symphony orchestra soloists, film composers, and exceptional talent from around the world." A heavy breath sounded from the front row. Someone exclaimed softly, "Oh my God, it's real." And in all these years, he continued more slowly, "Rarely have I heard anything that made me stand up like it did. Silent. Not the empty silence like when Lena finished playing, but a different kind of silence, the silence of authentic listening. That girl, Lena, she wrote that song. I looked towards the stage." Lena nodded, tiny as if afraid that nodding too hard would make her lose the courage in her heart. "Doctor." Monroe nodded back. "Ladies and gentlemen," he turned to the crowd, his voice filled with emotion. "It's an original composition. It's not a performance. It's a voice. It's art." Something inside me snapped open. My heart is pounding, my eyes blurred, and for the first time all evening I saw people were actually looking at my child. No more phones, no more indifference, just eyes. "May I ask," he turned to Lena again, "to accompany her on the piano one more time if you agree?" I turned to Lena, the child's eyes turned to me. Just a slight glance as if to ask, "Can I believe this, Mom?" I can't say. Just nodded slightly, nod as if putting the whole world in that nod. And Lena walked out. Slowly. "No rush, don't bow your head." Mr. Monroe gave up his piano chair to his son, then sat next to him, not taking up space, not leading, just accompanying. His hands hovered over the keys. Wait for Lena to start. And then she played the song again. Lena put her hands on the keyboard, the light shone on her little shoulders, still wearing a purple flower dress with the hem of her mother's hand-patched dress. But this time I sat differently. No more shrinking, no more worried eyes looking down at the auditorium. It's concentration, serenity. I know that if I play this time, someone will actually listen. I'm not breathing. My eyes were glued to my child, my hands tightened on the armrest of the chair. And then Lena started. The first notes rang out, still the same melody. But something was different. It's not because you play differently, but because there is a new layer of sound, soft, thick, solid, echoing below, cushioning each note of your music. It's the hand of Dr. Monroe. He did not lead, not overwhelming. He followed Lena like the wind lifting a kite, like light making an already beautiful painting more straightforward. The music in the auditorium is no longer a whisper. It becomes an affirmation. I could feel the whole room changing, no more whispers. No one zipped up the bag anymore. The children sat still as if holding their breath. The middle-aged judge put down his pen and clasped his hands together in front of his mouth. A mother in the front row slowly wiped her tears with a tissue, and I sat there, my hand covering my mouth, tears just flowing, because for the first time in her life no one looked at Lena as a poor girl with a single mother. No one looks at you as a pitiful exception. No one sees you as a shadow in the shining crowd, but an artist, a storyteller. Both people, old and young, sit next to each other, sharing the same language without speaking. When the last note sounded, I almost felt time stopped, and then, a beat later, it was as if the entire auditorium suddenly woke up. Applause erupted, not the polite kind of clapping. It was a resounding, long, intense round of applause. Someone shouted, "Bravo!" Someone stood up. Some people held up their phones and filmed the moment they knew they had just witnessed something special. I stood by instinct. My hand hurts from clapping too hard, but I don't stop. I saw Lena. She turned to look at Dr. Monroe. eyes sparkling with tears, and then she smiled. Not a pleasant social smile. It's the first smile I give myself. For the first time, I know myself deserves to stand there. Dr. Monroe tilted her head and whispered something to her child. I couldn't hear, but Lena nodded. Then I stood up and bowed. Don't bow low, not timid. Don't try to ask permission to be loved. It's a bow full of confidence. The audience roared again. At that moment, I no longer heard anyone whispering anything about single mothers. No one talks about the patched dress anymore. No one looks at me anymore like a shadow on the sidelines of the stage where their child is shining. I only saw eyes looking at Lena with admiration. And I know, everything just changed. That night when Lena got home, she didn't change her dress. The girl sat on the living room floor, still wearing the purple floral dress her mother had sewn at the hem, her hand holding a small keyboard, her fingers gently tapping a few wordless notes. I brought out 2 bowls of cereal, not having enough energy to cook anything else, spread an old towel on the floor like an impromptu picnic. We sat there under the yellow light amidst the steady sound of the ceiling fan, not saying much, just staying silent, knowing that both of our hearts were full. Lena looked up, her voice whispering as if afraid of breaking that fragile moment. Mom, do you think I can really go where the musician said? I looked at her. Her eyes still shining with something between emotion and disbelief. Then I gently pushed back a strand of hair that fell from her forehead, softly saying, You don't have to go there to be a musician, Lena. You're already there. Tonight. The following 5 months were nothing short of as spectacular as in the movies. I still work 2 jobs. Still wake up at 5 in the morning to clean the elementary school hallway. Still come home at night to wear an apron at the restaurant next to the highway, and still plan carefully every time I go to the market. But one thing is no longer the same, the feeling of having to hide who you are. Lena is still Lena. Old hoodie patchwork sneakers, mom's paper lunchbox wrapped in a nylon bag. But she walked into the classroom at the arts centre outside St. Louis with a straight back, bright eyes and confident voice. Every Saturday morning I make hot cocoa, mother and child get in the car, drive through the cornfields, the radio plays soft music. We don't need to say anything but still understand each other. Lena studied under the guidance of a former pianist who had performed in Europe. The teacher told me she writes as if she has lived many lives. I don't explain. How can we tell that those songs were woven from evenings without money to repair the car, from the saying, a poor girl with a single mother, from the sad eyes of a child when no one applauded after the first song? How do I express that? That guitar with jammed keys was the only place where my child felt he had a voice. Every night Lena still plays that song again, the first song where no one applauded. But now I play differently. Not faster, not bigger, but more firmly, more plump. It's as if each note has become your own, without anyone's permission, without anyone's recognition. You just need to feel right. And I also changed. For many years I believed that I had to be quiet. I had to be humble. I had to know my destiny. That as a single mother, I should be grateful that I can still walk into a room where other people wear beautiful dresses, smile charmingly, and never have to be embarrassed because dinner is just bread and boiled eggs. I used to think that if I were hardworking enough, patient enough, quiet enough, my child would not be judged. But I'm wrong. My child doesn't need my protection from the world. You need me to believe that you are worthy of entering it, no matter what you carry. Dr. Monroe did not come to save my child. He just listened, really listened. And by standing up, asking for the microphone, and playing with a child that someone else passed by, he brought the entire audience to a halt. Just one person. Someone patient enough to listen to the end, and that action, no fuss, no drama, is what opens up a whole world for Lena. I'll never forget what he said to me after that show. That girl has something we can't teach. She doesn't need anyone to give her a chance. She creates it herself. I just make sure people don't miss it. The thing that makes me unforgettable that night is not the sound of applause. It was the moment Lena turned back to look at me with eyes that were no longer looking for permission, but a look that knew she had the right to be there, firm, full of faith, and for the first time, no need to apologize for daring to dream. I tell this story not to brag about a happy ending, but to remind us that behind every silent child there may be a piece of music waiting to be heard by someone. Behind every bow there may be a dream that's just missing a believer. And sometimes what is life-changing is not a miracle. It was a look at the right moment. One person stood up while everyone else was still sitting. If you ever feel ignored, ever play a song that no one applauds, ever write something that no one reads, ever live a part of your life that no one asks about, remember you are not invisible, and be the first to stand up for someone. You never know, maybe you are the reason they believe they deserve to be heard. If this story makes you stop, feel something, remember something, or simply makes you feel better, leave a comment below. Tell me, when did you find your voice? Who listened to you first? Or have you ever stood up for someone? I read every line. Because listening is action. And telling is also a way to heal. If you want to hear more real stories, rustic, profound, and sometimes make you feel you are not alone, please click subscribe to the channel. Turn on the notification bell and share this video with someone who needs a reminder that they can still be seen. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for believing in the power of a story. And thank you for listening with all your heart. See you in the following video. And don't forget, your voice always deserves to be heard.